Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ang McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ang McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Human Side of Business. I'm Ang McCabe, CEO of Intuitive Performance, and I'm here with Maria, our change practitioner and performance coach. Maria, how are you today?
I'm great, Ange. I'm excited about today's discussion because we're diving deeper into a topic that's at the heart of what we do, helping workplaces invest in their people for long-term success.
Absolutely. Today, we're talking about upskilling your workforce, why it's essential, how to do it effectively, and what organizations can gain from creating a culture of continuous learning. Before we dive deeper, I just want to quickly share something I've been trying lately that's been a real game changer for my focus and energy. It's called Magic Mind. It's this little mental performance shot that combines nootropics, adaptogens, and vitamins to help with clarity, productivity, and even stress reduction. I've been using it for a week now, and I can honestly say it's made those busy work days feel so much more manageable. If you're curious, you can check it out at magicmind.com/HSB20 and use the code HSB20 for a discount.
Okay, so the conversation around upskilling is so timely, but before we really get into it, I just wanted to define it in case anyone is listening and hearing that term for the first time. So LinkedIn Learning defines upskilling as when an employee undertakes learning to expand their existing skill set. So these additional skills enhance the worker's performance in their current role, potentially advancing them along their career path. So with rapid advancements in technology and shifts in the job market, businesses that don't focus on this upskilling risk being absolutely left behind. But those that do, we see them thrive.
Exactly. So let's get into this. We're going to explore why upskilling is more than just a trend, how leaders can implement sustainable learning strategies, and some real world examples of companies that are getting it right.
So starting with the big picture, and why does upskilling matter so much right now?
That's a great question. I feel like it comes down to three key things: adaptability, retention, and innovation. First, the speed of change in technology and industry demands means employees need new skills just to keep up.
Yeah, the one that has like big flashing lights around it for me is retention. Employees just stay longer at organizations that invest in their growth. So learning opportunities make people feel valued. I think in a sentence, that's how I would explain.
Exactly.
That.
And our third one is innovation. So when employees are learning, they bring fresh ideas to the table, and that drives business success.
Right. And I think there's a shift happening where companies are realizing that upskilling isn't just about technical skills. It's about, dare I say, soft skills.
That aren't so soft to learn.
Aren't so soft to learn. Exactly. Yeah.
That is 100%. And in fact, LinkedIn's workplace learning report also shows that leadership and interpersonal skills are just as in demand as digital skills.
You and I are steeped in it, so it's not as shocking. But, I think when you and I go out in the world and work with some of our clients, it is news to them that it should be of equal focus. So if a leader's listening and thinking, okay, I hear you, upskilling's important, but where do I start? What would you say?
I like this question too. And for me, a few things come to mind. In short, what I would say is really understanding the objectives and skill gaps that exist within your organization. And this could come from performance reviews, it could come from employee feedback, or even looking at the future business goals and asking, what skills will we need in the next 5 years?
That makes so much sense. Yeah. So what you're saying is it's either coming from a place of perhaps taking stock of things that aren't working so well currently, perhaps, or a gap in like current to future state, or from a retention perspective, maybe it's being like, maybe a team member's requesting this from their manager, what can I get in the way of training or upskilling. Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
So in thinking about this episode, I made a list, me and my lists.
You didn't make another list.
I sure did. And I thought about all the quote unquote soft skills that have come up in the past in coaching conversations. So I'm just going to run through them. It's a short list of 24.
Quickly.
At a reasonable pace. And let me know if any of these resonate with you and to our listeners. So verbal and written communication, active listening, presentation skills, self-awareness, empathy, conflict resolution, decision-making, delegation, coaching and mentoring, adaptability in group settings, conflict management, cross-functional collaboration, creative thinking, analytical reasoning, decision-making under uncertainty, handling stress and setbacks, openness to feedback. Stay with me. We're at number 18. Growth mindset. 19. Meeting deadlines. 20. Setting goals. Managing workload efficiently. Taking initiative. Meeting commitments. And ethical decision making. So those are all the things that I feel would fall under soft skills. And
I gotta jump in here.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm kind of giggling and laughing with you, of course, Maria, is to me, this sounded like a lengthy list of adverse symptoms that you would read on the back of a new prescription that's way too strong.
This is the adverse. This is a symptom list of perhaps a team or an individual that hasn't received upskilling support, perhaps.
That's very fair. And pointing out too that as we get into this a little bit further, knowing that we've made a short list, I would say, of 24 skills to upskill in 2025 or to focus on, it doesn't have to be all at once. But we'll continue down the road and talk about that.
So after reading that list, my question for you is, if in your gap analysis, you have a mix of soft and technical skills that could use upskilling, where do you tend to recommend starting, or does that vary? Does that depend?
Yeah, I'm thinking a couple things. Like to take a step back, I dislike gap analysis because it's pointing out that someone has a weakness, which it's not wrong.
Yeah.
It's a correct term. However, the way that we've worked with clients in past is talking about what is your current baseline and therefore what do you want to do?
Yeah, baseline. That's
right?
good. Yeah.
So because when it comes to things like the quote unquote soft skills, emotional intelligence, like all of those untangibles, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I strongly feel we should hone in on and have different conversations, because it's not black and white.
Yeah.
It's not good or bad. There's some skills that lean into each other. There's some skills that could be in isolation. So to go back and respond to your question, what do I tend to recommend starting off with, or is that a variable type thing? The answer is yes to both. So I typically recommend to start with self-reflection, or otherwise known as some form of assessment.
Right.
To really understand your current approach or baseline.
Yeah.
Also doing a bit of research as to what is this assessment outcome going to do for me or the organization.
Yeah.
Then, it's really about understanding clear goals or objectives. So what do you want to accomplish? How does your department look differently? How do your team members respond to this? Or what are the expectations of your direct supervisor or leader, C-suite, what have you? What are their expectations of outcomes? So I think having those conversations are also pivotal as well.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes what we hear with clients, kind of to take us down a rabbit hole, is essentially they don't know what they don't know. And so taking a little bit of time to take a step back and figure it out is super important, because then you can have higher expectations of, either internal facilitators and coaches or external, because you have super clear goals or objectives. With that in mind, again, remember we talked about Maria's list of 24 soft skills. I would strongly suggest that once you have, your assessment in place, you're figuring out where you're going down the road, I wouldn't recommend taking more than 3 or 4 soft skills on at a time.
Yeah.
Because after all, we are human first, right? And the other thing too is to shift from starting and finishing a course or a learning opportunity or a development opportunity, shifting that lens more so to how do we create these as habits, not just an upskilling exercise.
Yeah.
To me, and in my experience in the HR world, when we start to think about skills as a start and stop, that transfers to all employees throughout the organization. It's really important to have that learning culture, which we're gravitating more towards too in many industries. And there's the opportunity to layer on that with regards to habits. And what I mean by habits is, what is it that you need to take away from this particular development offering or situation? And how do you apply it in the workplace in a sustainable manner? Yeah. How do you integrate it? All right. So once a company has identified skill gaps, how do they go about filling them? Like, what makes an upskilling initiative successful?
Yeah. I mean, you just mentioned a few, but there are some that work really well. So a bit of, to follow on what you just said, is embedding learning into daily work experience. So it's exactly that. It's how do I build this in? How do I integrate it? Often that does turn into more of a habit practice. Yeah. So people are more likely to engage with training that feels relevant and immediate, like habit stacking, but for learning. So embedding it in whatever way, making sure that, like you said, when someone leaves a room after they've attended their 8-hour training, what does that then look like in the workplace, and how does it keep going?
Yes. And that's why micro learning, i.e. short focused learning sessions, is gaining so much traction. With everything moving so fast in this workplace, in the world that we live, clients are looking for shorter bite-sized sessions that are actionable, full stop.
Yeah.
And when we're leaning into this learning methodology, it's really easy to integrate into a busy workday. Oftentimes, and I think you can agree with this, Maria, is that, when it comes to leadership versus operations, there's always been the versus.
Yeah.
Instead of it being a leader identifies with and influences from a leadership perspective and an operational perspective.
Yes. Yeah.
Took me a minute to get that out, but I got there.
I was with you the whole time. It made complete sense. Yeah. So another big one, which again, I think the micro-learning piece feeds into it, is personalized learning. So I also think, or we see now more than ever, different learning styles emerging. And if we can give folks options, so whether that's a self-paced online course that they can close the door and do that in their office, then great. Or is it peer mentoring? Is it a workshop? That will absolutely increase engagement. So personalized.
Yes.
And I think, again, that's where the micro-learning piece can really come in there.
I love that. And it's not just about throwing training at employees or team members and hoping something sticks. It's really about designing learning in a way that works for them. And when I use the word them, what I mean by that is oftentimes organizations feel that leadership development should be customized either to their industry or sometimes to their company.
Yeah.
I would argue that learning and develop needs to be customized for each employee too.
Yeah.
It's not an easy feat to do. However, again, when you have strong goals or objectives, your assessments are in place, you know what jobs require what skill sets, you have all kind of your proverbial quote unquote ducks in a row.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier to provide those customized experiences for your team members.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes down to understanding leadership's role in this. So like you're saying, if objectives are clear, organizational objectives are clear, that's a huge component feeding into what learning you take on or what training you take on. So if leaders aren't supporting upskilling, so whether it's giving employees time or learning to lead by example, it won't be sustainable. So again, it's like in our last episode talking about that, creating a culture of learning.
Yes.
You very much do have to start there.
Yes. And
so listen to that episode.
Yes. I'd also love to hear from our audience in our podcast comments or wherever you find us. Like, let us know, what are you seeing out there? I'm always curious about that stuff too, right? But you are correct. When leaders actively participate in training, it really sends a clear message that learning is valued in the organization. Yeah. Again, I cannot harp on this enough. When it comes to financial aspects of a job, that only gets your employees to a certain perspective within your organization, right? Like once you have psychological safety around finances, then you need to add value if you want to engage and or retain your employees, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That makes me think of a company we worked with recently. They wanted to improve communication skills. There's that soft skill again.
And it's so familiar, communication.
Across their teams.
Yeah.
But instead of just sending employees to training, the managers also took part in team coaching. And that buy-in made all the difference.
I still get goosebumps when I hear this because I remember it and the results were phenomenal. There was higher engagement within that department and organization, better collaboration, and it even increased the retention rates.
Yeah.
We should have more case studies on our website.
Yeah.
Audience, what do you think?
Okay. We've gone through what it looks like, its value, but let's be real. We'll address the elephant in the room. There are barriers for sure, whether they're real or perceived. So what stops companies from upskilling effectively? You're smiling. She's smiling.
Well, the reason why I'm smiling is the biggest one that comes top of mind for me is time. And when I think about time in leading other team members, if they tell me I don't have time, to me, that's equivalent of what are you prioritizing?
Yes.
And if you're not prioritizing learning, i.e. the time, whether it be an hour a day or 2 hours a week, or whatever makes sense from a cyclical perspective of your organization, you're not going to get return on investment from your team members. Like we've done large case studies in past. And most HR people know that it can be, again, anywhere 2 to 3 times that person's salary. And then take into consideration with our innovative industries, the training, the social norms that leave your organization. So leaders worry about taking employees away from their work and thinking that it will hurt their training or productivity, when in actuality, it expedites it.
Yeah. It's interesting because companies that prioritize learning actually see increase in productivity long term.
Yes.
Employees just become more efficient, and a big one is they're more confident. So it's almost like I've challenged clients, when the rebuttal is I don't have the time. And so it's like, okay, where would you like to spend your time? Do you want to spend it on training and development, or do you want to spend it on recruitment?
Right.
Because folks don't have a development path within your organization.
Very much
So if it's not time in one way, it's time in another. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And another barrier, this is a big one, especially in economic downturns. And I have a pet peeve towards that. That's cost. There's often the perception that training is expensive.
Keyword being perception.
Yes. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
And what I want to add to this from an evidence-backed perspective, we've been doing some research, right? And we found out that as of recent, from places like HBR, Gallup, Forbes, McKinsey & Company, Deloitte, SHRM, when you're thinking about the cost per employee or annual costs throughout the year, think about it from this perspective.
Okay.
We know that leadership effectiveness improves by 32%. Sounds small, but wait for the figure.
Yeah.
Which means that the team achieves goals faster.
Yes.
Again, innovation industries out there.
Yeah.
What is the biggest thing? Getting to market, right? For many of us. So now let's translate. What does that mean in a dollar value? For a company that has an annual revenue of $7.5 million a year, the cost savings is over $2.4 million. So let's break it down a little bit further, right? So let's just say you have 5 directors, and training and development could be anywhere from $2,000 per employee all the way up to maybe $14,000 employee per year. If you're saving $2.4 million and getting to market faster, whoa, like it was mind blowing to me to see these stats.
Yeah. And to go back to what we said earlier, if whether real or perceived, if cost is a barrier, there are lots of cost-effective ways to upskill.
Yes.
A big one being peer mentoring or coaching. Just having a support group is so vital. Job shadowing.
Let's back it up. What do you mean by support group?
So if I guess I think of it in the context of someone who's new to a role, but maybe there are folks within the department perhaps that have been in the role previously or have just generally been around in the organization for longer. I think there's huge value to that. But sometimes obviously you can have mentors outside the organization as well.
Yes.
And there are also lots of low cost or free online courses. So those are all options as well.
Absolutely. And again, what I would dovetail into that, if you're leaning in towards, courses that are easily accessible for economic purposes, cool. And How can you positively challenge your team members to bring habits back into the workplace based on what they're taking away from online learning or mentorship or what have you? Like, what's the purpose?
Yes.
You know, again, I think I've talked about this in past where we've had 6-figure budgets and it would drive me around the bend for leaders to come back into the workplace, and I'm super geeked out and excited.
Yeah.
What did you learn? What's going on? How will this be applied? And they're like, I don't know how it will be applied.
Yeah.
I learned, you know, the top 3 things that I should.
Yeah.
And that's great. I'm not taking away from that.
Yeah.
However, individuals expect more and workplaces expect more now.
Yes.
Like, it's changing.
It is.
And I also think that learning and development needs to catch up with that.
Yes. There's also another very real to me. This is probably one of the biggest, which the time and cost one feed into is just the mindset barrier.
Right.
So some people just resist upskilling because they're afraid of change. And so sometimes we have seen certainly the time and cost reasoning just be kind of a symptomatic excuse of being afraid to change.
That's where I would debate is where leadership really ought to come in.
Yeah.
Right? Because if employees see that learning leads to real opportunities like career advancement, basically they're much more likely or higher percentage in the sense of engagement. The other thing that comes up for me as you were talking, Maria, is what about our employees that are like 5 years away from retirement?
Right.
And the thing that I've just recently had the epiphany about is when you're doing or when you're implementing learning and development, there's a bit of that change management piece in there too.
Oh, big time.
Right? So you're trying to understand what's the sticking points, what are the needs, as we talked about earlier. But then if someone is quote unquote on their way out and they want to coast in the workplace, cool. And what type of education can leaders provide to them, said employees, that they're actually going to lose the company money? If they're not upgrading their leadership skills, right? So a whole bunch of other stuff can come in play with regards to, you know, small p politics. We both love that, right?
Yes,
Said no one ever. However, when we're thinking about today's market, what would it look like to reduce burnout of your team members by 26%?
Huge.
Again, impacts retention, impacts scope and scale, impacts, you know, the amount of retention bonuses sometimes that employers put out in certain industries.
I mean, health and well-being.
This is it,
you know,
right?
Sick time.
Yes, absolutely. That's my rant for today.
Oh, I appreciate it. So I'll keep pulling on that thread. So bringing this to life with some real world examples, do you have a favorite success story?
A favorite one? That's hard, but I would say one that I would hold near and dear to me in the sense of success factors is a tech company we worked with in past. They wanted to improve essentially the leadership skills within. And among their mid-level managers, this was the focus. So they introduced essentially a mix of what we would dub micro-learning, peer coaching, and on-the-job training.
Nice.
So what we seen was taking pulse surveys and checking in with regards to their objectives. Within 6 months, they saw a measurable improvement in leadership confidence and team engagement. I think we should also do an episode on leadership confidence.
Yeah.
Because there's so many angles on that.
Yeah. So micro-learning, peer coaching, and on-the-job training, that was kind of happening simultaneously. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's a lot, but it doesn't have to be.
No, for sure.
So when you're thinking about it from a micro-learning perspective, 1 hour per week. When you're thinking about it from essentially peer coaching, that could be internal or external coaching, an hour every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? So they have a safe space to reflect, grow, continue to positively challenge themselves. On the job training. So you're doing it live. You're accomplishing the stuff. I almost swore. You're accomplishing the stuff that you're set out to do.
Yeah.
And you're either cross-training or upskilling.
What's interesting that's coming to me as you're talking is it's sad that it feels like rocket science or earth-shattering, but it's just creating a feedback loop or a conversation. We're so used to just putting information in.
Yes.
Right? Putting it in.
Yes.
And now we're shifting from, okay, we're putting this information into you and go and do with it what you will. There's this like ongoing conversational kind of tone to it. So yeah. My other observation is what's key here is that they used multiple learning methods. So they had this kind of ongoing conversation and then multiple methods happening at the same time. And that seemed to make the big difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the best part here is that employee retention went up because people felt like they had a future at the company. They could see beyond the scope of their own work in this year. And they understood, again, that they were being invested upon or in.
Yeah. And that seems to be a trend as well, is that retention is a common theme that will bring people to training and coaching. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen something similar with companies who invest in soft skills like emotional intelligence and communications. They have a direct impact on performance and culture for sure.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
The hour goes by
That
fast.
was jam-packed.
Right? Before we wrap up, let's leave our listeners, our friends, I should say, our community, with some action steps. So if you're a manager or a leader thinking about upskilling, what's the first thing that you should do? So think about your work environment. Think about the conversational type questions and advice that we've given on the podcast today.
So I would say first, assess where your biggest skills gaps are. So I know you don't love that language. So if not assessing where your skills gaps are, just taking your baseline.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whether that's some form of assessment or that's performance reviews, whatever that looks like in your organization is just where are we currently? What's the baseline? Or, you can call it a skills gap if you like. And a really powerful question is, what skills will your team need to succeed in the next 5 years? So first, where are you at? And then what will we need for the next 5 years?
Definitely. It's so funny with regards to our pace differentials, Maria, because you are perfectly laying things out. And I'm like, all right, people, figure this out. Let's go.
That's why I'm here.
So adding or layering into what you're saying, the second piece is really making learning a part of the culture. Yeah. So that goes back to previous podcasts where we talked about safe to fail learning environments, encouraging mentorship, micro learning, and real world application.
Yeah. And third, model it. If leaders are learning, I would say learning and sharing about it. So if leaders are learning and sharing about it, employees will follow suit.
I love that. I love that. And if you want support in upskilling your workforce, reach out to us at Intuitive Performance. We'd love to help.
All right. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on the human side of business. We'll see you next time.
Take good care. Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious. Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.